Third time here, and it's very near and dear to me because myself and Sharon and dear friends Roger and Jeannie and actually in Portland another couple dozen of us, we left an abusive fundamentalist Bible church in 1996 and floundered and struggled and just really took years to find ourselves. And I did probably the dumbest thing you can do. I went to seminary to get a degree in theology and then became a pastor. This is a very broken church. So my recovery has included all of those things. And so that's what brings me here today. It's that I'm a survivor of spiritual abuse. And so I'm hoping to talk a little bit today, particularly about regaining your footing, about getting things hopefully a little quicker than I did, but regaining a sense of wholeness and recovery after you've experienced some degree of spiritual abuse. So let's see how close we're getting on our thing, and we'll jump right into it. There we go. I'm a pastor in downtown Portland, and I preach every single week. I don't have a jet or a limo or a parking lot or any of that kind of stuff. I'm in an old German church in the middle of downtown Portland, and it was the wealthy part of Portland when it was built and founded, and a lot of big-time historic Portlanders were there in 1874, and it was the wealthy part of downtown Portland because it sat about 15 blocks up from the river and caught a nice breeze in the summer, so it was where you wanted to live. And now it is Multnomah County's primary location for assisted public housing and recovery programs and all of that. So the demographics have changed a bit in our church through the years, and it's a very interesting place. But the reason I bring that up is to say that there's just no way that when I'm speaking or about even this issue, there's no way that it doesn't somehow eke out that I'm a pastor and that I'm a Christian. And so I just want to say this by way of disclaimer. I have no intention of making you a Christian or of bringing you into the fold or getting you to visit my church or anything of the sort. I'm here talking about recovery from spiritual abuse and those things. Yeah, Wendy?
But are you going to take up a collection after you speak?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I call it a love gift. All right, let's get going here. No, I say that because we have a deal we do called SAFE in Portland, Spiritual Abuse Forum for Education. Of course, we chose the name because it spells SAFE as an acronym. And it's become a very popular thing. It's a meetup that we have at a pub. A couple hundred people in the area belong, and not that many people come to it, of course. But it's become very important for me to say disclaimers and whatnot, because we have people from all kinds of Christian and neo-Christian and semi-Christian and wherever you want to call it, and white supremacy and political groups and Eastern groups, and people sharing this common experience of spiritual abuse that happens in a context of metaphysical, spiritual pursuit. And I think it's so high and dry in Portland to find any help that they come to me. So every time we meet, which is once a month, I always say that to people so that they know this is not, it's a part of what I do as a pastor, but this is not an extension of a desire for people to join my church or my religion. So I just say that to say when that ekes out today, don't think that I'm trying to trick you. So we're talking about regaining your footing after spiritual abuse, and I'm just going to lay out some definitions and talk about the experience that one has when they leave a spiritually abusive group. Ooh, how'd that get there? So that we can kind of set the table, because Pat and Heidi have done such magnificent work in a recovery process, theory, and plan, that rather than me tell you what I think works, because I'm really learning it, we're going to hand it over and do that. So for myself, I just want to talk about my experience a little bit. I was in a Bible church. It was a great little church. it believed all the right things and it had good teaching and all of that. And it focused on discipleship, which is basically a mentoring process of transmitting increasing pieces of practice and knowledge of the Christian faith, in my circumstance, onto a newer person, so that that person will, we would say, grow or progress in the Christian faith, and then go out and do the same for others. It's a basic pattern that's found in the Bible and in Christian history, but of course it sets up an amazing opportunity for abusers and for the recruitment of people. But that's what our focus was on. And we also lived in community with one another. We didn't start out that way. We started out in different houses out in southeast Portland. And then we moved for the purpose of discipleship and increased training. We moved into a neighborhood, and we intended on that facilitating our own spiritual growth, and then also blessing the neighborhood or bringing good things to the neighborhood. And that still happens today. There are Christian movements that move into the neighborhood to plant gardens and get everybody eating right, and others that move in to get everybody studying the Bible. And it's a common thing for people to want to live close to each other, and we did that. And things started getting a little weird there. But we ended up being a fully communal group that lived in a series of 5 houses in a really nice part of town up in the mountains overlooking Portland. And we shared those houses with 3-4 families to a house, and children and everything. And things, of course, went all sideways after that. So we were a pretty... I don't know why that's not doing it. Let me see here. There we are. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's working on my computer. I'll just talk and see if I can, see if it'll catch up to me. We grew very close together when we lived in community to one another. Shared meals with each other and throughout the week, because what we wanted was what you'll find a lot of Christians saying they want: a Monday through Saturday experience of their Christian faith. We wanted to have something that provided the deep friendships that we wanted, and the relationships and all of that. And it took place in the context of belonging to a church and, and just hanging out with each other. So by way of definition, let me just say a few things. I really wish this would work because I have such great pictures, but so Pat's going, I hope it works for me when I do my thing. And you're right to wonder that. By way of just giving us some definitions, let's just talk about spiritual abuse. And I'm going to give you a definition that's probably way too long, but I'll read it to you and see how this fits. Spiritual abuse is the use of inappropriate, excessive influence, pressure, coercion, or control to change a person's beliefs, feelings, and behaviors. The control of behavior decision-making results in the member losing autonomy and freedom, and instead experiencing heightened vulnerability, manipulation, coercion, and bullying by abusive leaders and the system they build. And it's usually to the end that the member contributes her or his material, physical, and emotional resources to the leader. Okay? It's not a good definition because it's so long, but it is basically a manipulation and emotional control and assault on your thinking and your feelings and everything. And the end of it is always to the attributing and the gaining of material, physical, sexual, wealth, all of those things into the control of the leader himself. And not all groups have that one leader, but most of them do. Most of them have the one unhealthy guy who's kind of running the show. The settings of spiritual abuse. That spiritual abuse happens in any group or community or organization that exists so that its members can explore and grow in a metaphysical or a spiritual atmosphere, studying spiritual theories. It could be yoga, it could be Buddhism, it could be Islam, Christianity, Judaism, it could be anything. Anything where people are getting together because of the idea of a metaphysical, in other words, an immaterial, unseen truths. And they want to dive into that world and explore things like love and wholeness and faith and, the big ideas. That is a place where spiritual abuse can occur. And those are the settings of it. It's common with other types of abuse in that in its recruitment into spiritually abusive groups, the members who are being recruited are either purposefully or inadvertently denied knowledge of what they're getting into. Okay? So if you're the diamond level cult member and you're out there recruiting, you know of a lot of things you're hiding about what your pastor's up to or what your swami or guru. You're hiding, you're not saying a lot of things because who's going to join a group where people get hurt like that? But if you're, kind of a lower level member just getting into it and into the group, you're going to recruit people to the group not realizing all the things you're not saying. But either way, the end result is the person being invited into the group, and I'm talking about people that join the group as opposed to being born in it. But the person invited into the group is denied knowledge that would be really good for them to have. It's not just knowledge of what's going on now that's so terrible or so hurtful. It's also knowledge of the core beliefs, the uncomfortable things about authority and about expectations and demands that just aren't shared with the person until the person's more deeply recruited and committed to the group. So that's the commonality, but it's distinct, spiritual abuse. It's distinct from other ones and other forms of abuse that happens, like just simple physical abuse or economic abuse and whatnot. The distinctiveness is that it is totalist in its nature. In a spiritually abusive system, the desire of the system is not simply that the subject or the member do things the leaders want her to do. The desire is that the member think things that the leader wants her to think. You see it all over the world. You see it in China today, in the government of China, in its worst aspects. A desire to have followers who all believe the same thing. Because something that narcissistic systems and leaders have in common is that they really need everybody to not just do what they say, they need everybody to really believe they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Then it gets easy to think that all day long they'll be obsessed and thinking of the leader and all of that. So they're after the thoughts. A totalitarian system just wants you to do what it tells you to do without fail. A totalist system wants you to be a true believer in the system and to think their thoughts. Spiritual abuse, and like the thing I came from, is a totalist system. So those are just some definitions about what I'm saying here. There are wounds to spiritual abuse, and this will really make up most of the rest of what I'm going to talk about. And in addition to my computer not working, the little clock's not working. So will somebody please raise their hands at 10:05? Is that good? Or at 10:05. Will somebody commit to doing that to me? Because I really appreciate that. Thanks. So, the wounds of spiritual abuse. I want to talk about the effect of being in these kinds of groups, and they're really all effects that I personally have shared. So I'm not speaking theoretically, although I've been out of my group for 23 or so years, and I've seen this is really consistent for those of us who have survived abusive groups. The first thing that I see is there's an ambivalence that happens with the believer in that, and by ambivalence I mean ambivalence in decision making. That's why about a month after I left the group, I spent about an hour in front of the Levi's section at Macy's. I couldn't decide on stone-washed, pre-washed, regular 501s, button zipper. I couldn't make up my mind. Same with white and brown eggs. There was something that really happened to my free decision making, and my biggest worry at that time was, Jesus, the rest of my life going to be like this? And I did what a lot of survivors do. I just walked out of the store. not sure what was going on. But I mean ambivalence more in a relational way. We have trouble forming healthy, good relationships soon after we leave an abusive spiritual group. We're not sure who to trust. We might not ever trust pastors again. And I certainly am an untrusted person by a lot of people that I meet. But I experienced that ambivalence relationally too. You don't even know if you trust the survivors that walked out the door with you, let alone fresh new people with ideas that perhaps they feel strongly about. A survivor of spiritual abuse is ambivalent in those relationships and also has become a bit of a mind reader. Abuse survivors are mind readers. They pick up 50 signs and symptoms when you and I might walk in a room and pick up 5. Okay? Because of their abuse, they learn to read the signs to avoid pain. It's like if a kid comes home from school and his dad works the graveyard shift, and I'm just making this up. His dad works the graveyard shift and then sleeps all day, but first he really ties one on, goes to the bar, and gets good and sauced before he comes home and falls asleep. And when he's tied one on and wakes up all grumpy and everything, he's violent and he's an abuser. And also, when he, on his way home from wherever he's working, where he ties one on, the car's always parked wrong. I mean, it's kind of halfway in the driveway. Okay, an abuse survivor is the kid who turns the corner on his way home from school and looks to see how the car is. It's crooked. I think I'll go to Bobby's house for a couple of hours until Dad goes in and record. You see what I mean? So we become abuse survivors, and one of those things makes us very slow to entrust ourselves to people after this thing. So another thing and another quality of abuse and the symptoms of it is indecisiveness. We have a difficult time making decisions because we've spent so much time under the controlling leadership of people who really have a life goal of making decisions for us. And they're very savvy and powerful and charismatic and good at it. You know, all the things you want to find in a good leader, they seem to have it. And they also will want to make decisions. And experiencing that spiritual abuse, they have many examples of having their life run for them and not making their own decisions for themselves. I recall when I left our spiritually abusive group, one of the people who left with us, it was a few months later, and she ran into one of the gentlemen who was still in the group. And she said, yeah, I'm in an apartment now. We moved into an apartment and are living there. And he goes, really? How'd you do it? She said, well, I talked to the landlord, filled out the paperwork, and paid the money, and set up the electricity, did whatever I had to do. And he said, really? Well, it's because when we're in those groups, we lose control of so many of those basic life skills. It makes us indecisive and afraid of stepping out of them. Another thing that we find in abuse survivors of this nature is emotional volatility. Oftentimes, spiritual abuse survivors will move quite quickly from anger to depression to anxiety, and they even show those emotions, it seems, at the same time. And it happens pretty quickly. Sometimes the most innocuous stimuli can send a survivor into a place that's terrible. It's the classic idea of the soldier who has experienced a firefight that lasted all of 10 minutes and has impacted and changed his soul forever. So when he hears a firecracker go off, guess where he is? Back where that firefight happened. Well, in the instances of spiritual abuse survivors, we're very often triggered back into an emotional response that fit the firefight we were in, and you would call it a complex experience for those years, and we go back there pretty fast. So there's some emotional volatility there, and it makes us appear sometimes emotionally a little immature at times, and maybe making some decisions that aren't very good for us. Another effect that we see when people leave groups that have kind of gone off the rails is anger. And they're angry because what they're saying is, I can't believe they did that to me, and I can't believe that I let that happen. I'm angry. Of all the emotions, and we'll talk about a couple of more, and strangely enough, of all of the emotions, Anger is probably the best. Something did happen to you. You were mistreated. The problem was you weren't angry when it was happening. The problem was you thought that was life. So the anger issue can actually take you somewhere. I mean, if it turns you into a mean person over a period of time, that's not cool. But if the anger causes you to acknowledge an abuse and something wrong and cause you to say, no, I'm realigning my thinking here now. That wasn't right then. It's not right now. Ticks me off. I'm angry about it. And I'm going to live there for a little while and see where that anger takes me. Hope it doesn't take you to jail, but the anger can actually be okay. As compared to the worst and most horrific experience of surviving spiritual abuse, you're probably all thinking it anyway, it's shame. Shame. How terrible. When you meet a survivor of any kind of abuse, physical, sexual, economic, and you find them ashamed. Now what I mean by that is the feeling of intense personal unworthiness. Not just unworthy like, oh, I was really bad this week, I'm not worthy. No, I mean unworthy like I don't deserve the air I'm breathing. I don't deserve it because I am an unworthy person. You can call me a human being if you want to, but I'm ashamed. And that kind of shame is saying there's something very, very wrong with me. I don't have the answer yet to that. I find it in my religion, but quite honestly, to relate how to deal with that, that's a toughie. And it comes back and bites me too, still, here all these years later. So I'll move on. Another emotion that people have, and a very pervasive feeling, is guilt. I'm ashamed of what I did in that place. And whatever kind of a group you were in, I was in a church that became really more of a crime family than a church, and involved a lot of drug and sexual and dishonesty and weird stuff like that. And it wasn't like I was Mother Teresa hiding in my room because I was so pristine and pure. I was a part of it all. I was a junior criminal myself. And so in leaving the cult, I carried a bit of guilt there, just a lot of guilt, especially raising a family partly in the cult for those years. So guilt is something that we carry with us out of that experience. We have difficulty in expressing feelings and beliefs. Spiritual abuse survivors have been verbally stifled in the groups that they've been in. In other words, in a spiritually abusive group, it is not a free marketplace of ideas where people can say anything, think anything, and take their time to work through the big issues of life. Not true. There's a script that is metaphorically handed to you at the door of what is acceptable communication and unacceptable communication. Acceptable criticism, which usually involves the church down the street, and then unacceptable criticism, which involves saying, good grief, where did he get that? So we have experienced difficulty in expressing ourselves when we leave these groups because we haven't been able to do so for so long in our abuse. Another thing that we carry with us often is theological rigidity or theological confusion. Theological rigidity or confusion. Well, I'll deal with the last one first. We are confused because oftentimes the systems of belief that we embraced in the group, we left maybe because we saw the faulty reasoning of those systems of belief. Okay? And so a new belief didn't take their place right away. We had a beautiful house of belief that we lived in the abusive group. And we started seeing the wrong parts of it, and the parts that were illogical and didn't make sense. And we lived with them, but after a while our brain kind of said to us, look, either spend your life being a little crazy about this stuff or get it together and be one thing or the other. And as we decided to be one thing, honest with ourselves, we admitted that theologically the group wasn't really so tight. So that's we're left theologically confused a bit. But we also, and this is perhaps the thing that I see that hurts a lot of people the most, is we become theologically rigid. Okay? We joined a group. Let me just use this by way of an illustration, and I hope I don't get all spacey on you here, but we joined a group, and let's just say, metaphorically, we joined it with 50 solid beliefs that we believed about this group. 50 things that we were ready to cut off an arm for, because we knew we were right, we knew it was right, and we believed it. But as the years went by, and we're in this group, we realized that we did not believe 5 of those 50 things anymore. They were wrong. We looked at our Bible, we said they were wrong. We talked to our friends and saw they were wrong. However we got there, we ended up with 45 things. And we said, those 5 things that I no longer believe are so wrong, I'm walking out the door, I'm leaving. That's great. We left. But we left with 45 beliefs, some of which are good and right, and everybody from Billy Graham to the Pope, everybody believes the same thing. This is the core of what it means to be a Christian. Some of those 45s. But some of those 45 beliefs we had are kooky and wrong, or rigid, unfair. And we carry them with us into our recovery, and we carry them into the next church we go to or the next group we go to. So we walk in with some things that we've left the group, but we walk in with some beliefs that are quite rigid. And that's, in my church, people who have been through these kinds of experiences, they'll often leave for that reason, and I hope they leave on good terms, and I mean, I'm fine with it, but I have not fit the check off on some theological things that they believed back in what was a cult and have been unexamined and unexplored, but have become the litmus test for the real faith that they're going to hang on to. That's a part of recovery, is that we can become easily theologically very rigid. And you can just think through the kinds of damage that can do in your relationships and whatnot. We also experience financial need or financial sensitivity. By need, I simply mean, I'm going to wrap this up pretty quick. By need, what I mean is we've spent a lot of money we shouldn't have spent. And we haven't made a lot of money we should have made. We haven't taken overtime shifts we should have taken, and we don't have the money. We might look like we have the money because in our group we dressed nice and acted, we were educated and all that, but we're poor as church mice. And so oftentimes we experience economic hardship having left the group. And so we should remember that no matter how anybody looks, they have probably been taken to the cleaners by their group. We experience conflicts with loved ones. I just got 3 more. Conflicts with loved ones. We have strained or broken relationships with our pre-cult or pre-church, whatever you want to call it, family and friends. And when we walk out the door, those people that love us are going to say, thank God you're out. Let's have the old Kenny back. And they can't get the old Kenny back. and things have changed. There's been hurt. There's been Thanksgiving dinners you have not been to. You have not shown up at birthday parties, funerals, Christmases, and all kinds of things because of the demands of your group. And there's a need for healing and restoration in time. So one of the wounds we carry out is an unresolvedness with some of the closest relationships in our lives. Our mom, our dad, our brothers and sisters, our buddies from high school, the people that we love. So there's oftentimes conflicts and a distancing. And so people often come out or come into healthy churches with unresolved conflicts. It's a little hard for normies, people that are in healthy churches and weren't in these kinds of things. It's hard for them to understand normies. Isn't that a good term? It's an AA term. I was driving with some friends and they were in the AA thing and they kept talking about normies. I said, what do you mean normies? They said, well, it's people like you that don't go to AA. And I said, okay, normies. It's such a cool word. Okay, a couple more things. There's oftentimes a distinct lack of preparation for life outside the group. And I don't just mean the very obvious ones like I don't have a driver's license, I don't have a social security card, and I don't know how to make top ramen, I just ate it raw, or whatever the horrible conditions. I just mean I don't know how to quite act around people who are different than me I don't know how to quite handle it. When I left my group, which was a very fundamentalist kind of a group, I wanted to be friends with my paramedic partners at work and everything. And I realized I had a lot of hang-ups that kind of got in the way of that. So I was relationally a little disadvantaged in that and was not prepared for life outside the group. It wasn't just shopping for eggs and buying Levi's. I had some troubles getting along out there. And finally, they often find, and we find with survivors of spiritual abuse, a particular sense of loneliness and disconnectedness. The loneliness, there's two main things that I see. The first one is the loneliness that happens just because you've made a decision for yourself that's alienating and isolating, and there's not usually a huge, warm, inviting community waiting for you to have all new friends. And then the second thing is the loneliness because the people that you left that are still in the group, they're your friends and you love them. Yeah. So I have people that are still in my group that I was in, they'll probably be glad that the thing didn't work here because their picture was on there, but I love them. They're my friends. We hunted together and camped and shopped, and our kids grew up together and are sibling trauma bonded and all that. And I love these people. I wouldn't trust them as far as I could throw them. But I love them, and I'm lonely because of the closeness that we experience together. So when we're looking at recovery from spiritual abuse, that's something to remember, is that this is not a person who had no friends in the cult. He or she is a person who had friends and had relationships and discovered the faultiness of them and is experiencing the grief of that. Okay. Well, that's about all I have.